nation gets torn apart by religious fanaticism, when real issues get hidden by jingoistic agendas, when fake news is peddled on primetime shows, I will create the difference by bringing out facts and only facts. On my special program, Hard Reality, Monday to Friday, 8:30 p.m. only on QVive Network. Hello and a warm welcome to QVive Network. I'm Neelu, Vyas, and we welcome you to our special program, Hard Reality, where we look at the bare facts of issues in and around which are not discussed too much on the mainstream media. Now, today, let's look at what is happening exactly in China. There is frustration, there are grievances all over. There is a huge outpouring of public anger on the streets because of China's zero COVID policy. Now, is this policy really challenging the political authority of the President Xi Jinping? What is going to be the impact? And does it really bring an end to the communist regime in China? All these are questions which are staring at everyone. Joining me now on all this issue is Professor Shrikant Kondapalli, who is from the Center for East Asian Studies of Jawaharlal Nehru. He's supposed to be an expert on China. I welcome you on QVive Network, Mr. Kondapalli. And my first question to you is that what's really happening in China? Are people not really able to gauge what's exactly happening over there, even despite the fact that there are a lot of visuals which are getting leaked through the social media?
Well, a lot of people are demonstrating, protesting against
Is breaking.
2019 in Wuhan. There was the lockdown that has been implemented across China, and this resulted in a lot of hardships. If it is for a few days, it is still fine. People will bear with it, but it's almost 3 years now, and there is no site where they can really, put up a mask and go into the market, buy things. So there are too many restrictions on the Chinese people with the so-called dynamic zero COVID policy implemented since January 2020. So what basically that means is a lot of border controls. Nobody except for diplomats are allowed in. And if by any chance the Chinese are coming back home, they have to pay exorbitant airfare, 6 to 7 lakhs rupees, and quarantine for 15 days in a 5-star hotel with stale food, no 5-star treatment there. And after that, they have an app based on their mobile phone or their wristwatches. So every time you go out of the home, you have to do the PCR testing at your own cost. And when you get back home from wherever you've been there, you have to do once again a PCR test and enter the data into your app. So if it is a green line, then you can go ahead the next day. Or if it is an amber line, you are kept under watch. If it is red line, obviously you cannot even move outside. So huge, and you have to pay for all these. So for the past 3 years, the Chinese have been paying all of these, and the pharmaceutical companies, etc., are really making a fast buck out of this misery of the Chinese people. And a lot of reports about the quarantine procedures also quite arbitrary, and the app-based ones also are used for surveillance. For example, last year there was the Evergrande housing bubble that busted, and a lot of people were to pay their mortgages and they were penalized. So the state is using the surveillance methods not just for COVID, but also for other means. And so they're really fed up. And as a result, today some 24 cities in China have witnessed protests. Out of this, nearly 80 universities have shown the demonstrations, and nearly 54 protests have been happening since last week of November. So for the past 2 weeks, there is quite a sporadic, spontaneous protests that were happening all across China. These are from Xinjiang, where the incident on 24th November took place of a lockdown building because they found some positive cases of virus and they locked down and there was a fire and 10 people were charred to death in this building. And in commemoration of those events, they have demonstrated across. But it is actually against the zero COVID policies that China, every other country has lifted all these COVID restrictions, but China is kind of misplaced because President Xi Jinping, this is his personal political policy of locking down people and also a way of political and social control over the people.
Interrupt you, Mr. Kondapalli. Didn't President Xi Jinping actually preempt that there's going to be a huge backlash on the streets, the way it is seen right now? You yourself said that it's more than 24 cities where this kind of a protest is seen. So are these protests restricted only to the zero COVID policy, or the people are also questioning the governance model of Xi Jinping? They are also questioning the censorship, the restrictions. So there is a certain heterogeneity about these protests. So what do you feel? I mean, didn't President Xi Jinping really preempt all this?
Well, the demands of the protesters indicated it is mainly related to COVID policies. The main four demands they have had indicated basically that there is a huge, concern over allowing public mourning for those who passed away. Secondly, ending brutal lockdowns. The third demand the protesters were saying is release human rights defenders, basically civil rights, which are guaranteed by the constitution but not implemented. And fourthly, protecting people's constitutional rights of assembly, of health, of a host of other things. So these are guaranteed by the constitution, and there is nothing sinister about those demands. But the fact of the matter is that they were not allowed to go into the streets, and so there is a lot of police repression on them, huge surveillance, and also localized kind of restrictions that were imposed. So at the moment, based on the demands of the people, it appears it is only the lockdown conditions that they are opposed to. And in fact, there is a lot of misery that the Chinese people are facing with this zero COVID policies. Nowhere else we see this type of restriction in the world today. And they want to drum up the phenomena that they were open, transparent, efficient, but they never gave figures of the infections. They never allowed the WHO delegation to visit all the places of Wuhan and also give the blood samples or the drainage samples, which are mainly used for seeing whether the virus originated and in what form it originated. So none of these were given to the WHO, World Health Assembly Organization delegation. The two delegations that went to China were not given the exact data. So that resulted in a lot of speculation whether this is a man-made virus, a biological weapon, or there is something sinister with the Wuhan Institute of Virology where this virus came from.
Mr. Kondapalli, I was reading maybe on 2 or 3 websites that apparently Xi Jinping has eased down the restrictions. Are these stories correct, or we still continue to see these kind of protests on the streets?
That's correct. On November 20, there is a circular that was issued on 20 measures. These 20 measures include, waiving of the PCR tests and reduction in quarantine time from 15 days to, they didn't specify the exact number of days. They also mentioned about a few more restrictions being relaxed in these 20 measures. But these have not been implemented across the country, number one. Number two, 3 days ago, 4 days ago, Vice Premier Sun Chun Lan, who is in charge of the COVID 19 related pandemic control, she made a statement saying that there will be a lot more restrictions to be removed. But we have not seen these to be actually being implemented at the moment. And so, while there has been a policy decision, but at the ground level, we have not seen the restrictions being eased at the moment.
But Mr. Kondapalli, whatever is happening in China right now, does it really dent the political authority of President Xi Jinping in any way? Is he going to change the way he is governing right now? And there is too much of over centralization. Is he really going to change the way he is running the government at the moment?
Well, since he has taken the dynamic zero COVID policy as his historical legacy, so he's sticking to that point continuously, and every other document, including the October 16th to 22nd 20th Party Congress. 20th Party Congress reiterated dynamic zero COVID policy. Technically, what it means is for the next 5 years, till the 21st Party Congress, they have to implement the dynamic zero COVID policy officially. That is the kind of import the party Congress has on the policy guidelines. Of course, they will see the ground situation improving, and so they probably will tweak the dynamic zero COVID. That's a different matter, but technically, it is still the main guiding principle. So, since this is Xi Jinping's crafted policy, so there is a lot of ego problem here. And if he admits that there was a failure, no Communist Party leader ever admitted to any disaster, including the Great Leap Forward or other things, where nearly 40 million people were killed. And we do not know exactly how many people were killed in China due to the COVID 19 since October 2019. They were never transparent on this issue of infections or death toll or anything. So once the dynamic zero COVID policy is relaxed, we probably will get some inkling about the exact figures. But having said that, this is the protests in 20 odd cities is a reflection of the failure of governance, is a failure of the political legitimacy of President Xi Jinping, because this is his pet project. This is his pet policy. And so the responsibility lies with him on this. We have seen some change in the opinion regarding the COVID 19. So probably let us see whether they would be able to relax or not. It has actually led to a lot of problems for the people in China.
Mr. Kondapalli, the very often asked question is that will President Xi Jinping take a relook as far as his policy towards social media is concerned? Because people say that had he taken a look at what was happening on social media, probably he wouldn't have to face so much of backlash. So is there going to be some kind of a change in policy towards social media? Will they encourage more usage, or will they censor it further? One doesn't know right now. What is your assumption?
Never in Chinese Communist Party governance issues, they will never relax the social networking sites. Weibo, WeChat, Topan, Douyin, these social networking sites are fully under the control of the Central Committee of the Communist Party Propaganda Department. They also have what is called Wu Mao. A Mao is 50 cents, so Wu Mao. So this is the cyber police. So if you alert somebody that they are posting so and so, you get Wuma, 50 cents as an incentive for this. So there are 120,000 such commoners, cyber
Yeah, Mr.
police.
Kondapalli, it's quite interesting to hear when you explain this, but how long can Xi Jinping continue with a repressive and a regressive policy like this in times when the world is totally open to the social media? I mean, he's trying to create an impervious wall, which he really can't. I mean, despite all the restrictions, so many things have leaked out. People know what is happening on China's streets. So doesn't he repent? Doesn't he regret on whatever is happening?
No. Simple answer is no. They have none of your Twitter, Facebook, Coup, or any other social networking sites. Forget about Google, Yahoo, or other. None of these open in China, and this results in what Oracle mentioned as intranet, not internet in China. They may have 800 netizens, but none of them can access Google or any website outside the Chinese purview. And so the Chinese people may be using VPNs to read about the events outside, but this is only a small minority. And even then, there are some, if you are caught with VPN, you are charged some 23,000 renminbi. That's about 230,000 rupees fine. And so there are a lot of restrictions on this. So repenting, no Communist Party leader ever repented in China. So I don't think Xi Jinping will repent on this issue of dynamic zero COVID policy. In fact, they're painting this as a success.
But Mr. Kondapalli, if you look at the composition of the current protests which are happening, many people are trying to compare it with what happened in 1989 on the Tiananmen Square. Would it be right to make a comparison of the protests which are happening right now with 1989?
1989 was a massive scale. Millions of people participated. According to one estimate, 2 to 3 million in Beijing. During the May to June 1989 protests. Their main agenda was anti-corruption and democracy. However, in this we see, in the current protests in China, we see nobody is asking for democracy, nobody is asking for anti-corruption drive. They were basically asking for lifting the COVID protocols so that people can go for a normal lifestyle. They're not asking for the moon. They're not asking that the Communist Party be removed and democracy be. It's a very simple issue that we want to live properly. And so it is a basic human right that they are asking for, not about the grand issues of Communist Party being replaced by democracy or other
Mr.
things.
Kondapalli, I've been reading that there are calls for change. Now, what is that change which is signaling, and which is being signaled to the world? Is it a change of the communist regime? Do people want democracy? Like you're saying that people don't want democracy at all over there. At least that's not the message. But since the people are talking about a call of change, what does that mean? I mean, people do not want democracy. Like they've decided, they made up their mind that they are happy with the communist regime.
No. The Chinese want democracy, but this is not on the agenda right now. Who will oppose democracy anyway? If you are getting one person, one vote, and you can decide about the leadership, which country, which people will object to democracy? So I don't think that is the problem. The problem is the Communist Party restrictions on COVID-19 related pandemic. Second, it is true that there are a few voices which said that Xi Jinping should resign. But this is, I think, a minority view, although there is a lot of concern about the policies. And so obviously, Xi Jinping taking responsibility for the last 3 years of governance related problems. So that is a view that has come about. For example, in Shanghai Metro, some people received the messages that Xi Jinping should resign. And these commuters immediately, of course, they were clamped down. The police went and looked at their mobile phones, what kind of messages they are receiving, etc. And also in some demonstrations in Chongqing, there was some who suggested that Xi Jinping should resign. So apart from these few incidents where there was a demand for his resignation, the majority of them were basically asking for the COVID protocols to be lifted.
So one last question. You were saying that people are not wanting democracy immediately to return. At least that's not on the agenda. So what happens now? Is Xi Jinping looking at this as a temporary change, a temporary problem, which he might overcome soon? Or how soon would be that?
It's quite possible because the Communist Party is in the nook and corners of the country, and above the county level, that is Tehsil level or Mandal level, the Communist Party is based in this, and there are 96 million cadres. Of course, in demonstrations, we have also seen the Communist Party members participating in these protests. There is some speculation that the Communist Youth League members were also part of the demonstrations, because none of them were given the highest position in the Politburo Standing Committee in October 20th Party Congress. So some said that they are the disgruntled leaders who led these movements, but we do not know. It is speculation. But most important, the Communist Party is at the nook and corners. So actually, they have institutional capacity to overcome all these protests, clamp down on these, like what we saw in Tiananmen Square, and overcome the whole protest. But possibly the effect is that since 1989, this is a pan-China movement, and so the trigger could come up again in the near future. Based on the policies that are being implemented in China. Specifically, as the Chinese growth rates have fallen from 10%, 14% before, to 10% and currently 2.4%. So for every 1% decrease in growth rate, there are 8 million unemployed. And it is said that there are 80 million unemployed in China. And because of the COVID-related restrictions, because they cannot go to the factories, and also 18% unemployment this year. So this is also fueling a lot of discontent across China. So the Communist Party is able to tackle this. But what about legitimacy? What about providing public provision of goods and services to the people? They promised it after Tiananmen Square that they maintain growth rates, but the growth rates are falling. So this is the major structural problem for the Communist Party.
So there is a grievance, there's frustration building in, but will President Xi Jinping learn the lessons? Because there is obviously a social impact. People may not want democracy to return, but they do want easing down of restrictions, which has already begun. But we'll have to wait and see how Xi Jinping manages this challenge. Always a pleasure having you on the program, Shrikant Kondapalli. It was really a pleasure to have you on QVive Network. For our next episode of Hard Reality, stay tuned to QVive. Thank you so much. When the nation gets torn apart by religious fanaticism, when real issues get hidden by jingoistic agendas,